In this sixth section of the mental status examination training, we will learn about interpersonal issues. My name is Tom Field, and I produced and narrated this training series. Let's return to the overview. In this training series, we will learn via a scaffolding process. In this section of the training, we will learn about interpersonal issues and review affect and mood, thought process, memory, motor, and speech during guided practice activities. At the conclusion of the 8 sections is an end of training test. I encourage you to follow the handout as we progress. You can use scrap paper for guided practice if you'd like. There's also a sheet available for this. And while watching guided practice video case studies, there may be instances where a section of the mental status examination is not fully apparent, and in those cases it is okay to indicate unable to assess. The definition of interpersonal is a relationally driven behavior. This means the client's interactions with others in their immediate environment, for example, a counselor or therapist, or in couples or family therapy, other family members. There are several concepts we'll be exploring in this section of the training: contempt, defensive, dismissive, guarded, hypervigilant, oppositional or defiant, and suggestible. Not covered in this section of the training, but important for you to know about, are aloof, which means disengagement from others due to egocentrism, also known as narcissism or egocenteredness. Avoidant, which is disengagement due to anxiety and desire to escape contact, and someone who is avoidant will, for example, avoid eye contact. And cooperative, which is normal or typical relational behavior, and someone who is cooperative will be fairly open with the interviewer and comply with requests or questions that are asked. So let's look at interpersonal issues. Contempt is described as a passive-aggressive style of relating to others. Someone who evidences contempt may roll their eyes or imitate vocal tone in a mocking manner. According to John Gottman, contempt is the greatest predictor of divorce among couples. Let's watch an example of contempt.
So I got in this argument with my mom, and I was trying to explain my point, and all she could do was say, "Ellen, character is who you are when no one's around."
This client engages in eye-rolling when describing her conversation with her mother. She also imitates her mother's vocal tone in a sarcastic manner. And this combination of eye-rolling and sarcastic imitative vocal tone is suggestive of contempt. Defensive is described as reacting to the input of others in a hostile manner. The person usually feels threatened and under attack.
So yeah, that Nobel Prize-winning book I've been working on, I've been really working hard on it, and I think I'm really getting close. I've done a lot of writing actually, and I think I'm just really quite a good writer, and I'm really looking forward to getting that thing done and getting that prize.
You do seem pretty confident about winning that Nobel.
Well, yeah. Why? Don't you think I could win it?
Well, I think surely you have a shot. What's the book about?
Well, it's about. Are you trying to get my idea from me? Why are you asking?
This client reacts with an accusatory question when the interviewer confronts their confidence in attaining such an unrealistic goal of winning a Nobel Prize. They say, quote, "Why, don't you think I could win it?" And later also accuses the interviewer of trying to steal their ideas by asking more questions about the client's writing content. In short, the client feels attacked and responds in a hostile manner. Dismissive is described as reacting to the input of others by disregarding, rejecting and thinking no more about it. The person doesn't necessarily feel threatened, but thinks they know better.
Well, I mean, maybe you could hold down a job better if you cut down on the drinking, perhaps?
No, that's not it. I mean, my job is going fine. My boss just doesn't like me. He's been looking for a way to fire me for a long time. I got no problem with drinking.
This client doesn't react with hostility, but shrugs off and deflects the interviewer's suggestions about their drinking. They say, quote, "That's not it," and then blame their boss for getting fired. For example, saying that their boss was just using drinking as an excuse and wanted to fire them anyway. You can see this is different from defensive in that the person doesn't necessarily feel attacked and shrugs off rather than directly confronts the interviewer's comments. Guarded is described as being overly careful about sharing information with others, usually from lack of trust. Someone who is guarded may be closed or secretive, and infrequently self-disclose. Guarded can be an associated symptom of trauma and of paranoia.
Tell me how your week's been.
It's been alright.
You said you were going to go and hang out with one of your friends?
Well, I thought about it, but I really didn't feel like it.
So, I imagine you've probably been busy doing other things.
Just the usual. Nothing exciting.
What are some of the things that you did get up to this week?
Work.
Okay, how was work?
The usual.
This client provides non-specific, stock answers and demonstrates closed communication even to open-ended prompts. They seem closed or secretive. This person is guarded, and as you can see, guarded is often paired with laconic speech or providing terse responses. Hypervigilant is described as excessive attention to the external environment, stemming from heightened anxiety and fear. Hypervigilance can be an associated symptom of trauma.
I really didn't get to see my neighbor this week. He's getting quieter, and I really wanted to tell him that I really appreciate the fact that he's getting quieter, but he just wasn't around for me to tell him that I so appreciate that he's being quieter. And I talked to the lawnmower guy too, and he had his shirt on, and he told me he couldn't turn the lawnmower down because it's a lawnmower, and it's just really hard for me to hear that noise. It's nicer that the neighbor's quieter, but the lawnmower it's still really annoying me. And
I noticed yourself looking out the window a lot. Is there something bothering you in the window?
No.
This client's eyes dart around the room, back and forth, almost constantly throughout the clip. And when asked by the interviewer about her looking out the window, the client looks to the window at first, then also briefly to their left, and then returns to look at the window before responding to the interviewer. This excessive attention to the external environment is suggestive of anxiety and hypervigilance. As an aside, if someone is hypersensitive to sound, in addition or even in lieu of being sensitive to vision, looking around their environment, this can also be symptomatic of hypervigilance. So, for example, if someone tends to jolt when loud noises occur in their environment, or tends to be listening very closely to sounds around them, that can also be suggestive of hypervigilance. Oppositional or defiant is described as intentional attempts to elicit a power struggle or argument with another person, particularly someone in authority. This can involve baiting others, which is direct defiance, or ignoring them, which is indirect defiance.
So how do you feel about being here today?
Oh, I don't really need to be here.
Okay. What would be helpful to talk about today?
Whatever. Don't really matter to me.
This client seems to be negativistic, if you will. They seem to intentionally bait others, which is a form of direct defiance. They say, quote, "I don't need to be here," and quote, "It doesn't matter to me," with a scornful facial expression and flippant gestures, in a way to intentionally draw the counselor into a power struggle. Defiance, or oppositional, differs from defensive in that the client doesn't necessarily feel attacked, but almost elicits an attack or a confrontation from others. Suggestible is described as uncritical acceptance and compliance with another person's proposal or recommendation. This person is easily influenced.
John broke up with me on Friday, and I've just been feeling miserable. I know that it's all my fault, and it's all the stupid mistakes I've made, and I've just been such a bad girlfriend.
You know, sometimes when breakups happen, it's the fault of both people. You know, both people have a role to play in relationships, and I wonder if that's the case here as well.
That sounds right. I guess it is both of our responsibilities.
And I'm willing to bet that if we talk to John about it, you know, he would say that it's not all your fault.
Yeah, I think he probably would say that.
This client is highly critical of herself at first, though is quickly persuaded by the interviewer that her point of view might be inaccurate. This ease to which the client is persuaded to another position can cause interpersonal problems because the client doesn't have a stable sense of self, of values, for example, of opinions, and is too prone to change based on input from others. It's time for you to try your hand at coding interpersonal issues. For the following series of video case studies, you are going to code affect, mood, thought process, memory and consciousness, motor, speech, and interpersonal issues. Here comes the first guided practice.
You know, when you were saying that things have been going downhill, and then BAM! You know, things just got a lot worse. I think I understood that.
Do you think they can hear us next door?
Pause the video now and assess the client for affect, mood, thought process, memory and consciousness, motor, speech, and interpersonal. This client has a full and congruent affect. They seem anxious and concerned, indicative of dysphoric mood, and their external expression of that seems congruent. Their thought process seems tangential and distractible. They seem to be distracted by things in their environment, and they make tangential comments in relation to that. For memory, we would indicate unable to assess here. We don't have enough information. Same with motor or movement, unable to assess. Speech seems to be regular rate and rhythm. And for interpersonal, we would code hypervigilant, because the client seems hypersensitive to noise in their environment. They jolt or they jump when the interviewer says, quote, BAM, and they ask if others can hear them, and that suggests some degree of anxiety related to external environment. Let's watch the next video case study.
I'm convinced that Steve is cheating on me. You know, I called him this week, and he didn't answer my call for 3 hours. And I know that he was available. He really should have returned my calls.
Is it possible that maybe he was just busy at work and That's why he didn't return your call?
What, don't you believe what I'm saying?
Well, I mean, it's possible perhaps that he was just kind of busy at work, right?
No, he wasn't busy. He's clearly not returning my calls.
Pause the video now and assess the client for affect, mood, thought process, memory and consciousness, motor, speech, and interpersonal issues. This client has a full and congruent affect, although I think you could make the case for it being blunted. It does seem to be some restriction here, but I don't think it's full enough to merit being blunted or flat. Their mood is dysphoric, they seem irritable and snippy. Their thought process seems logical, but there does seem to be a possible rumination here, particularly about Steve not returning her phone call. We'd need more information though to code that. In terms of memory, we'd indicate unable to assess. They have relaxed motor movement. Pressured speech, they speak at a fairly rapid pace. And in terms of interpersonal issues, we would code defensive here, because the client reacts with some hostility and feels attacked based on the interviewer's response. Let's watch the next guided practice.
So I know that you said you've been wanting your daughter to call you. I kind of wonder if, your daughter's just been too busy to call.
Yeah, I bet you're right. I bet she is too busy.
I mean, it makes me also wonder that maybe she wants to call you as much as you do her. I don't know.
Yeah, now that you say that, I bet she really does want to call me as bad as I want to call her.
Pause the video now and assess the client for affect, mood, thought process, memory and consciousness, motor, speech, and interpersonal issues. This client has full and congruent affect. They seem euthymic in mood, fairly upbeat. Their thought process seems logical. They make clear connections between content. That we are unable to assess their memory at this point in time. We need more information. Their motor movement seems relaxed. Their speech seems regular rate and rhythm. Although I will note that the client seems to almost repeat what the interviewer says at times, and although it's not quite echolalia, it's not an exact repetition or mirroring, it is interesting that the client almost verbatim repeats what the interviewer says, but not quite. And in terms of interpersonal issues, the client is suggestible. They seem easily influenced by the interviewer's persuasion. Let's watch the last guided practice video.
John broke up with me on Friday, and I just feel terrible. It's all my fault. I just know it's because of just all the stupid mistakes that I've made. I've been such a bad girlfriend.
A lot of the time when there are breakups, it's like the perspective or the fault of two people. It's to do with the dance that you have in a relationship, and when one person doesn't dance, the other person doesn't dance, and so usually both people are involved. What do you think about that?
Oh, that's totally not the case with us. I know that it's all my fault.
What do you think John would say? Do you think he would say it's all your fault?
I don't think it matters what he would say.
Pause the video now and assess the client for affect, mood, thought process, memory and consciousness, motor, speech, and interpersonal issues. This client has a full and congruent affect again. They seem somewhat depressed. You could also indicate dysphoric here. In part because of their thought process, they seem to be ruminating, stating twice during the video clip that it's, quote, all their fault, and that sense of what's called intropunitive tendency to blame themselves seems somewhat depressive. In terms of their thought process, we would indicate here logical. I think you could indicate rumination here for attention. In terms of memory, we could indicate unable to assess. Motor, relaxed. Speech, regular rate and rhythm. And interpersonal, we would indicate dismissive. The client is fairly well defended, and when the interviewer provides some suggestion, the client easily just bats it off. So let's review. Today we learnt about contempt, defensive, dismissive, oppositional, defiant, guarded, hypervigilant, and suggestible interpersonal styles. We also learnt about aloof, avoidant, and cooperative. That concludes the 6th section of the mental status examination training.